Drama in India over El Zakzaki's hospital treatment. Head of the country's civil service, Winifred Oyoita, ends up in hospital after 4-day EFCC grilling. In international news, Hong Kong protesters apologize after airport chaos. And in sport, granny football takes South Africa by storm as older women take on soccer and aerobics to stay healthier.
This is ANN News.
I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Head of the Civil Service of the Federation, Winifred Oyoita, has landed in the hospital after being quizzed by the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission for 4 days. The Nation newspaper says this is in connection with an alleged 3 billion naira contract scam. During the 4-day interrogation, Oyoita was in custody of the EFCC. She was also questioned over alleged abuse of duty toll allowance, money laundering, and stealing of government funds. At least 600 million naira has allegedly been traced to the bank account of one of her key aides who has been unable to give any justifiable explanation for it. It has also been reported that preliminary findings show that about 3 billion naira has been traced to the head of service. EFCC has begun the process of obtaining an interim forfeiture clause so the cash can be seized. It has also blocked the accounts that holds the money. The anti-graft agency was said to be investigating alleged embezzlement by a former minister under whom Oyoita served as permanent secretary when it stumbled on her alleged diversion of funds into proxy companies and using different fronts or cronies to obtain contracts from ministers, ministries, departments, and agencies. Drama has ensued in India as leader of the Islamic movement of Nigeria, also known as the Shiite, Sheikh Ibrahim El Zakzaki, refused to be treated on Wednesday by doctors assigned to treat him by the hospital there. The Shiite leader said he wanted to be treated by the doctors originally assigned before he and his wife left Nigeria. Indian authorities are said to have expressed the willingness to return him to Nigeria with immediate effect. They said El Zakzaki will not be allowed to use their country to internationalize his group's activity. Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Information and Culture, Grace Isukekpe, says El Zakzaki has requested to be allowed to check into a 5-star hotel instead of being admitted to the hospital. His request was refused. She also said El Zakzaki created a stallmate at the hospital, which authorities resisted. The Nigerian government commended the Indian government and its handling of the situation and apologized for El Zakzaki's behavior. The government says it is ready to undertake his prosecution through due process once he's returned to the country. There is a poll report card coming out of the Nigerian High Commission in South Africa on some Nigerians there. Nigeria's High Commissioner to South Africa, Ambassador Kabiru Bala, dropped a bombshell in a television interview on Wednesday that more than 6,000 Nigerians are under investigation in South Africa for a variety of crimes, ranging from drug offenses to murder, fraud, and armed robbery. He said the figures came from the South African Police Service and that they should be viewed from a proper perspective in order not to tilt the balance. Barrow said we should not overlook the fact that some Nigerians engage in illegal activities in South Africa. He said some of the cases are being concluded or investigated, and those already convicted are in prison. A presidential tweet on Wednesday contained a stern warning to the incoming ministers who would be sworn in next week. The president said in the tweet the incoming ministers will receive clear implementation targets and that they will ensure, or he will ensure, they comply with the target. The president said their performance will be monitored by the Office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation. Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Boss Mustafa, has asked the incoming ministers to pick up necessary documents from his office to study ahead of the retreats to be held before their inauguration. An induction retreat will be held in Abuja for the incoming ministers today and tomorrow. Nigeria's traditional crafts are always in high demand within the country and are embraced by most tourists of the country. And some of the crafts include brass making, which dates back to centuries. The problem now is that trained hands in these traditional crafts are dwindling and the industry is facing tough times. As Kelechi Emekalam reports, a number of craftsmen in Nupe Kingdom are striving to preserve their traditional way of brass making.
The rhythmic clanging sounds of brass by craftsmen in the ancient kingdom of Nupe, a people known and admired for their works of art for several centuries. They've maintained the same old traditional style of processing the metal, with a locally made furnace and a wheel to fan it. It's more than a tradition passed down from generations.
This work is our heritage. If you are born here and you belong to this clan, then you must be able to do this work. If you are not born here, you will not be able to do it. Our children are passionate about this craft. We don't have to force them to do it. Once a child is 10 years old, he will know where to go to pick up the working tools.
Their works have drawn enthusiasts of arts and crafts from around the world. From spears and swords for war in the pre-colonial era, they've evolved into producing various products, including cooking pots, kitchen utensils, artifacts, and flower pots. But masters of the art are worried that brass making is gradually going into extinction.
This is due to a lack of raw materials. Before now, this place was always packed with finished brasswork, but now, as you can see, we just have a few because of a lack of raw materials. We would like the government to intervene in funding so that we may continue producing more. Previously, they would order large quantities. For example, they would order 200 kettles, then we would produce them. But the government now does not patronize us again.
Arts and crafts are Nigeria's foremost traditional occupations and have continued to serve as veritable tools for economic empowerment. However, not much attention is paid to them. Despite the constraints, the people of Nupe Kingdom are determined to keep their traditional crafts alive. They're exploring the use of metals including aluminium, silver, and copper.
Coming up, African news, Zimbabwe business back on track as power crisis eases. Then to later, international news, Hong Kong protesters express remorse for airport chaos.
You are watching ANN.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. Now to African stories. As Tunisia prepares for presidential elections next month, 26 candidates, including 2 women, have been approved by the country's electoral commission. 71 other applicants were rejected. The vote follows the death of 92-year-old President Beji Caid Essebsi last month. Essebsi was the first president to be democratically elected in Tunisia after the popular 2011 uprising. Zimbabwe's problems are many, but in the midst of gloomy reports, there is a shining ray of hope. As Faraya Wakutuyo reports, businesses are back on track as power crisis eases in the country.
3 days of continuous power have put this flour milling plant back in business. Its owner has his fingers crossed the situation holds.
We are happy that the power is back. We saw improvement as from Saturday last week, and the food production is now commenced. However, the losses of the past 8 weeks will probably require us to work in order to recover a full throttle for the next 8 months to recover from the 8 weeks. This is in respect of outstanding orders that we had, the fixed costs that we incurred during that time, the labor that we had to pay whilst workers remained idle.
Elsewhere, small businesses that were working by night to beat the load shedding are enjoying a return to relative normalcy.
This period has been abnormal. We are solely dependent on electricity. If it's not available, we can't work. So we are happy that there are deals in place to secure more power.
But the situation remains precarious, as dangerous as these makeshift connections. So any extra hours of power are a big deal, not just for the individual businesses, but for an economy encountering several headwinds.
Food industry, just like anywhere else in the world, is a volumes game. We have to produce high volumes so that there is more than what demand requires, and the unit cost becomes lower. So when we have a situation of low productivity, it impacts on the food supply itself, and further impacts also on food prices.
The government says it's negotiating for more imports, which it's relying on until depleted water levels at the main hydropower station in Kariba are replenished after the next rainy season. In the long term, it plans to accelerate the implementation of new power projects as well as the refurbishment of existing ones to bring them back up to full capacity in order to avert the recurrence of a similar crisis.
A senior army officer in Chad says 6 persons, including a soldier, died early Wednesday in Kaiga Kinjiria districts in the western parts of the country when a female suicide bomber detonated her device. The officer attributed the attack to Nigeria's Boko Haram jihadists. The officer said a number of people were also injured, but gave no figures. A provincial security officer said a woman wearing an explosive-laden belt blew herself up near the home of a traditional chief. The official said 4 guards as well as a soldier were among. Kaiga Kinjari lies in LAC province, which has a common boundary with a vast Lake Chad, a region shared by Chad, Cameroon, Niger, and Nigeria. Boko Haram launched an insurgency in northeastern Nigeria a decade ago that has since spilled over into neighboring countries. It has carried out at least 10 cross-border attacks in Chad since 2018, mainly targeting army positions. It is not unusual or uncommon to find young generations of Africans who are unable to speak their traditional languages. Foreign languages like English, French, Portuguese, and others have overshadowed traditional languages. Reporter Koleta Wanjohi tells us experts are calling for more efforts to preserve indigenous languages in Africa.
The Oromo is a culture found across parts of both Kenya and Ethiopia. Its traditional leadership system, called the Gada, ensures leadership changes hands every 8 years. It is recognized by UNESCO as an intangible world heritage.
I'm Kenyan, but Ethiopian Gada system is our law too. We respect it.
But westernization is threatening culture like this. Isabel Zaug is a researcher in Ethiopian languages. She says most indigenous languages are not used in areas like computer systems, and people are therefore more exposed to foreign languages.
Primarily, digital tools are being developed because of market demand. But some of these language communities they're not large. They may not have a lot of money, but they still deserve support for their languages rather than being basically, pushed by the tools to adopt languages or scripts that really they don't feel are their own.
According to the UN, there are about 370 million people worldwide who belong to indigenous communities. UNESCO predicts that by the end of this century, between 50 to 90% of indigenous languages will have been lost. That is why Africans are seeking help to preserve the approximately 2,000 native languages on the continent. Jennifer Koinante comes from the Yaku tribe in Kenya, which has only 6,000 people. She says preservation must begin at home.
In African, we are intermarrying. That's okay. But everybody have the language. Why don't we say that we have to speak our language, one of the languages, or the two parents? So parents have a role to play, a very crucial one. Because a language taught is different from a language that you learn when you are very young. So it is supposed to start from home.
Some Africans want Kiswahili, a language from Eastern Africa, to become one of UN's official languages. UNESCO is now collecting proposals from people around the world on how to preserve their native tongues. For the Oromia community, one way of keeping the culture going is by passing wisdom to the next generation of leaders.
When we return, international news. Hong Kong protesters express remorse for airport chaos. And later, sports. South African grannies play soccer to stay healthier.
You are watching ANN.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. Now to international news. Hong Kong's anti-government protesters have apologized for causing chaos and disrupting air travel at the city's international airport on Wednesday, after the airport was granted a court injunction to clear the terminals. Only a few demonstrators remained in designated areas, greeting travelers with signs apologizing for the event of the previous evening when clashes erupted between riot police and demonstrators. The massive sit-in caused the cancellation of hundreds of flights. By nightfall, police fired pepper spray at protesters who had seized 2 men. 5 demonstrators were arrested, while a group went to the airport to apologize the following day. Most protesters used Wednesday to regroup. 23 persons have been confirmed injured and receiving medical attention when a Russian plane that took off from Moscow en route to Zimbabwe in Crimea made an emergency landing on Thursday morning. The captain of the passenger jet was hailed as a hero for landing his plane in a cornfield after it collided with a flock of gulls seconds after takeoff, causing both engines to malfunction. Only 1 passenger was hospitalized, even though many had sought medical attention. The airline said in a statement that the pilot shut down the engines to avoid fire as the plane landed with its fuel tanks fully loaded. Euro Airlines lauded the crew for making the emergency landing and arranging a quick evacuation. The company said the captain, 41-year-old Damir Yusupov, is a highly experienced pilot who has flown more than 3,000 hours. Russian President Vladimir Putin's spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, hailed the pilots as heroes and said they will receive state awards. A suspect has been arrested after he barricaded himself for hours in a North Philadelphia home following a shooting standoff that left 6 officers wounded. Police say the stalemate lasted for 8 hours, but the suspect is in custody. 2 officers and 3 others who had been trapped inside the row house were evacuated by a SWAT team a few hours before the standoff ended. Philadelphia Police Commissioner Richard Ross Jr. told reporters before the standoff ended, negotiators had tried to communicate with the shooter, but that he only picked up the phone without saying a word. Philadelphia Mayor Jim Kenney has called for more gun control. He says the city's police officers need help keeping weapons out of the hands of criminals. President Donald Trump has offered to meet with Chinese leader Xi Jinping over escalating trade war between both countries and how best to resolve Hong Kong political crisis. In a series of tweets late Wednesday, Trump praised Chinese President Xi Jinping as a good man and suggested the 2 leaders hold a personal meeting. The U.S. announced on Tuesday it would postpone new tariffs on some Chinese-made consumer goods until December, instead of applying them in next month as originally planned. Meanwhile, increasingly violent and unpredictable anti-government protests have racked Hong Kong. The unrest, which began in early June, risks becoming the most serious challenge to Xi since he came to power in 2012. Trump had faced criticism for not taking a tougher stance on China over Hong Kong. Trump says the meeting would help solve the situation quickly and humanely. The world's oceans are awash in plastic pollution, and studies show it's having an impact on our environment. In Mexico, one local small business has an innovative and natural way it hopes to make a difference in solving this growing problem. Alasdair Beverstock reports.
Jessica Luis has a burger delivery business called Hambre Feroz, or Ferocious Hunger, here in Mexico's Oaxaca state. She makes monster sandwiches for her hungry customers, and part of her business model dates back to a local custom she saw as a child.
Hace muchísimos años, la gente de acá. Many years ago, the people from this region served food or wrapped their fresh produce in leaves from banana trees and almond trees. That was a great help, and that's what our project is about. Árboles de almendra.
She's taking that tradition seriously by rejecting commonly used plastic packaging and wrapping her orders in banana leaves and tying them with natural string harvested from the same plant. She's trying to bring awareness to the damage discarded plastic is doing to the environment. Gonzalo Bustillo is the director of the Juchitán Ecological Council. He says plastic has done serious damage to the local environment.
The excessive use of plastic, and particularly single-use plastic, has contaminated our town a great deal, especially the river, open-air dump sites which never existed before. It's done a lot of damage, and not only here, but across the state and across the country.
Jessica says she's already seen a difference with her banana leaves.
Y mucha gente, cuando empieza a ver que sí se puede. When they see that it does work, a lot of people have started to use banana leaves again, and that's great, because you take the old ways and breathe life back into the tradition.
Up next, sport. South African grannies play soccer, aerobics to stay healthier. Please stay with us.
You are watching ANN.
Welcome back. This is ANN News in Sport. The World Health Organization, WHO, reports that 70% of women and 41% of men in South Africa are overweight. This compares with the global average of 51% for women and 47% for men. But the South African grannies in this next report are out to change this narrative. They say they have found the magic to living long and looking younger. Julia Schuwer reports.
Meet the soccer-mad grannies from Amagritsa Football Club. The club started 4 years ago, and ever since, it has transformed their lives.
I was sickly. I had an operation, but now I don't even feel that I've got an operation. I started slowly, but now I can run like a youngster. I feel fresh. I had high blood. I was always sick, taking tablets, but now it's not bothering me.
I love my team because we're a new team, but we're striving and trying to do the best. I would inspire other ladies to do much exercise. Look at my age, but most people doesn't think that I'm that age. So if you exercise, join teams and games, you are very good.
Coached by former Orlando Pirates goalkeeper Innocent Mayoyo, this Gogos team is inspiring a community.
Some of them can't walk, some of them, their bones are stiff, their knees are stiff, but as you can see, these old ladies are active in terms of preventing diseases like your high blood, your cancer, your TBs, and it's a good example to the whole community to show that if you are prepared to work on your health, you'll still live longer.
Recent studies have shown that 60% of South African women are overweight and suffer from high blood pressure. But these grannies have replaced their medication with goals, and they're hoping to play beyond borders.
My hope for the team is to go overseas. I would like to go and play with other gogos in China.
These ladies have made a conscious decision to be fit and healthy, and they're hoping others will follow.
Secret to aging gracefully. That is ANN News this evening. Thank you for joining us. For details on these and all the breaking stories, visit the website annafrica.news. Conversation continues on our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ANN Africa TV. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Have a pleasant evening.